this over here so I can sit since.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just,
You're about to fall off the table. Your paper and pencil.
oh,
I need more space. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I hope you're ready for the start of the semester. I'm excited for it. I'm Marlowe Galliano, the director of the Center for Teaching and Learning, and I'm happy to be here with my colleague Traci Birdsell, talking about first generation students today.
so I'm Traci Birdsell, I'm the Senior Director of Educational Opportunity Grant Programs.
So, but why is it not showing?
Just click the.
Click the blue shirt.
Share. Thank you all. I got my my screens were updated and the logins were updated, and now I have 3, and so yesterday was a learning curve for me. Apparently I'm still in that learning curve phase.
Stretch it out as long as you can.
Oh yeah. I love learning. We're always learning, right? Yeah. So yeah, so would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Suzanne Rousseau. I teach math education courses.
And now several other things.
Yeah.
And you're the and dual credit.
Yeah.
I'm Eric Stoffrigan, biology, and
What biology are you doing now?
well, this will be the last semester, at least for a while, that I teach pathophysiology. That's what I've done the most of.
Yeah.
But I teach genetics and intro bio and a non-majors
Great.
class as well. Nursing.
They finally wrestled it away.
It was actually supposed to be on a couple semesters ago, and then it was like, last minute, we need another couple sections this semester, then we need one more next semester. So it's
So you
drug out
might,
a little bit.
you might still.
Well, they're teaching one as a special topics this semester at the same time while so,
No.
my numbers went way down throughout the summer.
Oh,
I think because spots opened up in that one, and then there was a
Right.
stampede over to that one, so.
that happens sometimes. Right? We get surprised by those things. Oh.
So some of the things that happen with first generation is one of the, I've been working with TRIO for a very long time. And so they're, part of the problem with first generation is actually having a common definition to start with. And so some of these are what other places have used. So students whose parents have not attained a higher education qualification. So that would mean a certificate or associate's degree or bachelor's degree. Students whose parents did not attend college at all. Guardians who have not obtained higher education degree in context. Actually, they often lack cultural capital, which we'll talk about here in a minute. LC's definition is the same definition that the federal TRIO program legislation uses, which students whose neither parent have graduated with a bachelor's degree. So one of the things, so that's a common definition that we have actually throughout the state of Idaho, like on the Idaho Common Application, it's asked in that realm as well, so we can collect that data statewide and those kind of things. But it's not to diminish saying that a student who comes in, if their parents got an associate's degree, they're graphic designers, they're doing great things, that's somehow less than. Like, we don't see that as less than. It's just that sometimes if a person hasn't went those upper division classes, then there might be a little gap in knowledge there that the student might need a little bit of extra help on. but definitely not meaning that if a parent got a certificate in welding or something like that, that's not valuable, because it obviously is. So we want to do that. So we have a common definition that we use here on LC's campus. So if, so we're starting from a common base of understanding.
Well, and we were talking about how, because of that definition, there's a lot of diversity in, the students here who would be considered first generation students, because they might have a parent who's like never set foot on a college campus before, or it might be someone who, even finished an associate's degree and did credits beyond that, but never finished a 4-year degree. So yeah, just when we think about how we're responding to those students, they're definitely not all coming from the same families with the same backgrounds.
In Idaho, I was just looking this up from my talent search grant, that in 2019, 72% of Idahoans would have been considered first gen. So, which ranked us 39th out of 50 states at that time. So, it's an interesting thing to look at.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So retention and graduation rates for first generation students are below that of continuing education students. So there was Ashanti Ishtani, sorry, in 2016 did some research, and what they found was that first gen students were 71% less likely to persist to sophomore year than a continuing ed peer. So that much lower retention rates. But then also the 5-year graduation rate for first gen students was lower, from 13% for first gen students to 33% for continuing ed students. And something else I would add too is, there's a group through the National Trio Association called the Pell Institute. And so they do all research on first gen low income students nationwide. And they have quite a few different articles and publications that they have. So one of the things to kind of add on to this, because so many of our students not only are first gen, but are also low income, is that the 6-year graduation rate is 11% for first gen low income versus 55% for having neither of those qualifiers. And that they're, again, kind of that first gen low income are 4 times more likely to leave in the first year than students who are neither first gen nor low income. So just to give you a little bit of data there. The cultural capital is really a lot of what we're talking about. They don't have the college knowledge, right? They don't have the thing to know that it's very common to get selected for verification for financial aid, for example, or that not everybody has it all figured out, or that the path is not always linear, or what a syllabus is, or how do I, I don't have enough food. How do I get food on campus? I mean, the myriad of things that a parent or sibling can help you with that they don't know is huge. And so what we try and do is help bridge that gap. And so that's really what we're talking about here in working specifically with first gen students, is how do we bridge that social capital or that cultural capital gap? Because they need to learn it from somewhere, and it's falling to us and it's falling to you in your classes. And how do we help support those students? And we also know, so I'm just going to go to the next one, talking about here about how first gen students are not recipients of institutional benevolence, but they're members of our community. Like, this is who we are as an institution at LCSC. This is who we are. No. And I'm going to skip ahead in a few slides, I guess that's okay, just because I'm on the topic. But at LCSC last year, 60% of our students were first generation of those who completed that portion. one of the challenges that we found out last year with our data was that we weren't asking our dual credit students that question. So if we looked at overall our 3,000 and some odd students, it looked like 47% of them were first gen. But when we pulled out the dual credit students, because we didn't ask them, then it was 60%. And we also know too, that sometimes that self-disclosure, it can be a little bit hinky sometimes too, because maybe I don't want to say that my parents didn't graduate with a 4-year degree, or I don't know why I'm being asked that. And so our actual data rates are probably higher, the number that are first gen, than actually probably what the 60% even is. So it'll be interesting to see this fall, because we started, after we found out our error, we started asking that. So we'll be able to have a clear data point, and I anticipate it's just going to go up. Because again, if we go back to what state of Idaho's is, it would make sense that we're around that, because our area actually is closer to 81% being first gen
In the region?
in our 5 surrounding counties here.
I thought that LC's rate was closer to 80% first gen.
I think at one point it was, but I think there are times when we weren't counting, maybe as, like, we didn't have the common definition set. But no, I think it varies too.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that last year I thought seemed to me to be a little bit low. That 60% seemed to be a little bit low.
Yeah,
because
a couple of years ago when I used the number in my grant, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh, it's like 78.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see what this year's brings.
The low income threshold, is that based on like Pell eligibility, some level there?
So in TRIO, it's based on 150% of poverty level, which is set by Health and Human Services. And so a family of 4, for example, I think the guideline is about 42,000. So if you use that kind of as an estimate, that's kind of where we're getting that, my definition of low income. But typically it would be some kind of Pell eligibility is what we use.
Tracy, do you know if they included our students in the prison and they were asking them that?
I would think so, because they would have had to fill out an application. But so I was just at the prison a few weeks ago and did a presentation on kind of college 101, how to be a good college student. And I got, because I did talent search applications on them, and I had 20 students and all but 1 were first gen. So I would say that we're probably,
Right.
right on track.
Yeah,
with
and
that.
as we increase the classes we're offering there, that's probably gonna show up in the numbers
Yeah.
too.
I'll let you go on to
All
the
right.
next section.
Yeah, so one thing that Tracy and I are, well, this is more me, but Tracy and I are partnering on this. One thing I'm working on is trying to build up resources at the CTL for teaching to first generation students. And so I'm hoping that one thing that comes out of this and some future work that we do is maybe have a Canvas module that includes some teaching resources. And then also I just one selection from our growing, not super big, but getting there, CTL library is a new collection that came out a few years ago. And I just took a look at this question by Teresa Hines Housel, and it's a really nice book because it's just a series of, it is a collection, it's essays written by mostly faculty members and scholars who themselves identify as first generation. And so some of the common themes that came out of multiple essays in this collection were kind of the idea of invisibility syndrome, just students not necessarily feeling recognized and seen for who they are, or in fact, kind of goes along with imposter syndrome, like feeling that they don't belong and that people don't understand their reality. Obviously, intersectional theory, understanding that the experiences of, an LGBTQ student is going to bring certain factors to that student's experience. But then if they are also first generation, they've got factors from that aspect of their identity and class. We've been talking about the poverty level and, having a low income status, how that combined with being first generation, brings that number down. What was it, 40% from the population that doesn't. So just remembering intersectionality came up in a lot of these essays. But one quotation that I thought was helpful for us to keep in mind is that first generation student initiatives can't be one size fits all, and institutions need to reach out to their white first generation students in different ways than their LGBT first generation students or first generation college students with disabilities, for example. To the first generation students, faculty, staff, and administrators reading this book, which is on our shelf over there, she emphasizes that your stories matter. And so I think that's one of the things in a little bit we're going to think about building a toolkit, right? And one way to address that and that sense of invisibility is to listen and to tell those stories and to make spaces for those individual stories to come through. So again, working toward resources, I hope we can develop a lot more.
So I've kind of already I skipped forward, so
All
I'm
right.
gonna skip this one. So
Yeah.
see where we-
Yeah. So now we get to really think about the first generation students that we know, and I'm sure we all know quite a few. And it may be, maybe that's you. Maybe it's someone in your class. So maybe if we'll just take a minute and kind of think about one or more, but at least one student, and that we could kind of brainstorm some descriptors. What is that student like? And then what shapes that student's experience in college? And I'm going to write some notes on the board so that we can work toward our toolkit here. So what do you got? Do you have someone in mind? All right.
I was.
Yeah. So what do you like, Suzanne, and what shaped your college experience?
Well, I think okay, I guess a clarifying question. My first college experience was getting an associate's degree, which was very different than coming back to get my bachelor's and then master's. And so
Right.
I'm going to ignore the associates and focus on.
Okay.
Okay. So what shaped my experience? I guess the fact that I was there because I was forced into a career change.
Yeah.
And so I think the thing driving me was that I felt that there was really no other option. And so like, I think that experience is very different than somebody that is sort of in that path by choice.
Yeah.
So that maybe changed what I was like as a student versus had I just been a bachelor student by choice.
Yeah.
I think it was very different, maybe.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that kind of gives you two different qualities of students that we, some of them obviously are here by choice. And then sometimes that choice it's kind of a choice, but it's kind of not, right? If you are a traditional student coming right out of high school and your parents have expectations, I think, which both first generation and other students, sometimes have this experience of like, they really don't want to let their parents down. It is a choice, but it sometimes doesn't feel like one. Yeah, what else?
So the majority of the students that I've mentored in my research lab have been first generation.
Yeah.
I think it's just because the pool we're drawing from.
Right.
But as I'm thinking about these students, I'm like, they've all been quite different. So that's sort of
Yeah.
what you were making before, is that, if I try to think of like, what is the first generation student like? And I'm like,
Right.
oh, they've all had some differences.
Yeah.
Although, so if I try to think about like, what were some of the common themes maybe? So the, I don't know what it is, like the more motivated of those types of, those students would ask a lot of questions that I wouldn't necessarily have thought about needing to ask when I was a college.
Oh, right.
I was not first generation.
Yeah.
But that also makes me think, what are all those questions that students are not asking because
Yes.
they don't feel comfortable
Mhm.
or they don't know who to ask? And so I think like, I've got a student who, just come in all the time with saying, now she's trying to fill out grad school applications. And, asking all of these questions about,
Right.
I mean, many of them I don't know the answer to because, it's a little more specific than I might know, but I'm still a resource because I still know, more than this student. But I'm like, how many students, whether it's
Yeah.
just right when they're here, they have no idea,
Right.
but I don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And so guys, I'm, so I'm trying to think about their perspective. It's like, so I forget that, these students sitting in here, I can't even remember what I didn't know as a
Right.
college student 20 plus years ago,
Right.
but I was not first generation, right?
Mhm.
And so I could, I knew from some of my parents' experiences, things changed a lot from when they were in college to when I was, but still some of those things about, registering for classes and what happened when a class wasn't available, or, what a wait list was, and it's just some of the challenges with like trying to get classes that might not be available, those are
Right.
things like I'd heard stories about them. So if something like
Yeah.
that happened, it wasn't going to send me into a panic because it's like, oh, this is a common thing.
Yeah.
And so then you do certain things about it or whatever. But I don't, I had resources. So if I didn't know something, if I didn't feel comfortable approaching somebody in an administrative office or a professor or whatever, I could call mom and dad and they
Yeah.
might not know, but they might be able to offer something.
Yeah.
So those students who are comfortable enough to come and ask me all these questions just makes me realize, what are the things I'm not addressing
Right.
for the student who's not coming and asking me questions?
Yeah.
I don't always know what those things are. I've learned a lot over, like,
Yeah.
oh, I need to say these things to my
Right.
students, in these classes because they're not gonna know this.
Yeah, I mean, and those things like registration, right? Financial aid, I think, is another one. And I always feel like as a faculty member, I never quite know what's going on with financial
I don't
aid.
understand them myself.
So, but obviously, it's great if we could at least tell them where to go to ask those questions. And to maybe, I've been thinking about this too, Eric, like, how do you anticipate what the questions that students aren't necessarily asking are, right? The things that they might not know, because you had those motivated people who brought the question forward. So then, you realize, okay, well, I didn't know that students don't know, this thing, but I'm going to make sure to share that. Have y'all seen some of the research about office hours and how, so I did make that change in my syllabus and changing the terminology from office hours to student hours and clarifying that those hours are not when I'm in my office working so that you shouldn't bother me, but instead the hours that I want you to come to my office. And
No, I just recently, I can't remember where this came up now, but something about office hours, and it was like that the more sort of personal things that professors were putting in their office actually was a deterrent to students coming in because they felt like they're now invading your personal space. rather than
yeah.
being in the office. And I'm like, I know I've brought in all these things.
Right,
like,
me too. Yeah,
feel more
yikes.
comfortable. It's just like it's a comfortable sort of place, but
Uh-huh.
this, so I haven't seen the research on it or whatever, but it was
Yeah.
this thing that, and now I'm sitting here going, what, do I need to like rethink these things? Because
Right.
I would feel like
Gosh.
going into some sterile environment versus like, oh, this is, but I don't know. So
Yeah.
that's sort of an interesting thing to maybe get some students' perspective on, is that, you know, when you see all these, you know, pictures of my family, or you see this and that, like,
Right.
does that make you more or less
Right.
likely to come in? So I don't know. I mean, now, but it's not something I ever questioned before, but now I'm
Right.
questioning what it, from a student's perspective, what does that mean when they see
Yeah.
an office that looks one way versus another way?
Right. I have not heard that before, so that's really interesting. And yeah, maybe another thing to kind of anticipate, right? Like, how do you communicate that in fact, I've made my office this way because I want you to feel comfortable. I mean, maybe even going so far as to say that. And Tracy, I know you've done things in your office with your comfy chair. And your,
Yeah, I have a set of comfy chairs that, and then I have like a table and chairs. So sometimes when a student comes in, I'll say, is this a comfy chair conversation? Or is this a hard chair conversation kind of thing? Do we want to, but another thing I was thinking of that I've seen with quite a few of my students is when something goes sideways a little
Oh,
bit,
right.
right?
Mhm.
They tend to assume that it's a sign I'm not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
Like, this is a sign from God that I'm not supposed to be here. And instead of it being like, oh, this is something that happens, if something doesn't go, sideways with your financial aid every semester, it's shocking, or something like that.
Right.
It's just an automatic, I think it's kind of maybe some of that imposter syndrome thing,
Right.
but I'm just not meant to be here then. It's instead of pushing through it and knowing that we can help with this.
Right.
Like, if you let me know the asking of the questions, and oh yeah, this is something easy. We just need to go talk to so-and-so.
Right.
But it's getting students comfortable enough to know that, to get outside their heads,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? To know
Yeah.
that, because they assume that everybody has the answers.
Right.
And that's rarely the case.
Right.
We just ask more questions. And so I
Yeah.
see that a lot with my first generation students.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I'm thinking, about those students that actually never even make it to the first day of classes,
Yeah.
right? Like, that they have registered and then something happens and they don't come. And I think probably lots
I
of
had one of
times
those today.
right. Yeah, it's one of those things that if you have the knowledge of like who to ask, which someone might not, they might not know, okay, who should I ask? Or like, my financial aid isn't here, so I just can't go to college, not understanding that maybe it's going to be there in a few weeks, right? Or, I'm waitlisted for this class, so I'm not going to be able to take it, and so I think part of it is just, having the knowledge that you can try to work through these things, and who the people that can support you are. Advisors, definitely, but I don't know, when they first come in, they might not feel comfortable, they may not know how to contact that person, they might not know, be comfortable with using email to I don't know if that's the case so much anymore. Have you had that experience? Like, I know my kids who are 21, they absolutely hate email.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah, I think there's always some of those that will only ask questions in person.
yeah.
And like before or after class, they won't actually seek you out in your office. Although I have made the change to student hours, so we'll see how that, with a description in my syllabus
Yeah.
of what they're actually for.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say, one thing I started doing last year in my math 157, because they're frequently freshmen, and so I did this in the spring. So I had on the first day, I had them write a letter to themselves for like how to motivate themselves when they're struggling, or like if they're having a rough week or a rough whatever, like And I then collected them and saved them, put them all in envelopes with their names on them and carried them around with me so that when it seemed like someone was struggling, I could give them back their letter to motivate themselves. And as it turned out, I had one sitting on my table in my office for about 2 weeks, waiting. That student that was really struggling kept saying, I'm going to come see you. We kept making appointments. She never came. I finally started carrying it around again, took it out of my office. But at the end of the semester, I hadn't given any of them out because she was the one. And so I gave them all back and they were surprised. They had forgotten about it. They read their letters. Everyone cried. Like, it was really cool. So I'm going to do that again this semester, but I'm going to do it in all my classes, not just that one. But I'm going to preface it by reading Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible Very Bad Day to sort of let them know that we all have crappy days, weeks, semesters, like whatever, and then have them write their letters and give them to me, and I will save them and give them. And I don't know, I mean, again, it's like you can't hit on all the things that might happen, but I'm hoping that if I sort of start the conversation, then if something does happen, maybe they will ask or seek someone. Even if
I love that. I think that we, I mean, the research says that if a student makes a connection with somebody on campus, then they're more likely to stay, right?
Yeah.
So we don't ever know if we're going to end up being that student's person.
Sure.
Like, even it might not be, you might never have them in class again, but you might okay, congratulations, you're my person.
Sure.
And because of that thing that you did, that made them feel needed, special, belong, all those kind of things. And so I think one of the things that I enjoy about LCSC is I think that we tend to treat almost in a way all of our students like they're first gen, right? As opposed to it's a small population, because so many of our students we're using these special techniques with everybody, as opposed to thinking, oh, this is just for these 5 students that are in my class. It's like, no, this is for 20 of the students that are in my class, and for the 5 who might not need it, this is a good thing for them too. And so I think that that's something that I really, over the years at LCSC, have enjoyed. The faculty do so well is developing those types of tools for students. So
Yeah, maybe that's a good segue into the next slide. I'm going to move over to another part of the board where we could think about, we've already generated a few of these, some of the things that we might do to serve our first generation students. So I think, anticipating questions. Rethinking office hours. How to motivate yourself letters.
It was surprising. They couldn't believe that I saved them all semester and gave them back. They had all forgotten that they did it. And then, they were like, you carried these around all semester?
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Just waiting for you to have a crappy day. And
yeah.
I'm like, how cool was that?
Yeah.
I think too, Eric had mentioned about his office. Making an office feel welcome.
I have plans and like kid pictures and all the things.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's,
Interesting.
I wish I could remember now where was I when this was
Interesting.
playing? Maybe it might have been up at maybe it was up at the Inbury conference this summer or something. I don't know, I don't remember, but so I just remember being sort of taken aback by that.
Yeah, because you'd certainly think like that is what's going to make them feel good, right? And
I mean, office hours has been an issue for me always here, because I switched to I've got specific office hours listed in my syllabus this semester for the first time in a long time. In part because there was a semester where like I overhear a couple students talking who were saying, well, I have class during his office hours, so you know, and it's like, okay, so they're seeing here that they're seeing these specific office hours listed and they go, oh, I'm not available then. So
Yeah.
then there's no
I
point.
can't talk to it.
And so I like was just, you know, really making a point of like, open door, come by whenever, or if you want to set up an appointment, do that.
Yeah.
I didn't really see much happening there either. So now I'm going back and, you know, just sort of an all of the above, you know, where I still keep in the like, you can drop by anytime, you can make an appointment. These are specific hours as well, but you know, I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I think this, you know, that it's one way that if they come, right, they can have that connection that makes them likely to succeed. But I mean, I was not a first generation college student, and I went to my first time I went to a college professor's office was my junior year of college. Like, I did not want to do that. And then when I did, I was like, oh my gosh, I am doing so much better in my classes now, right? Like, shocker. So I actually am very explicit when I talk about office hours, or now I'm trying to call them student hours, you know, to share that information. Like, it was really helpful, and I was afraid to go. And, you know, I didn't. And then when I did it, like, I actually started getting better grades. I had better relationships with my professors. I was less afraid of them. And so I remember Spencer one year had a picture of his office that I don't know if it was on Canvas or in his syllabus. So in thinking about that kind of discomfort that students might have in walking into an office and not knowing what to expect, maybe that would kind of demystify that, like, okay, when I go in there, it's going to look like this.
And like in your case, right, you could have a picture that, and you know, an arrow that points two different chairs. Like, if you want to have this kind of conversation, sit here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me too, I guess I was thinking about it from your comment, and I went to at least one of my professors' offices when it was, you know, registration time to have a sign off on the registration form, but not really for any other reason.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking now, that got me thinking about the fact that, and you know, I put something, well, you know, whatever. I put so much stuff in the syllabus and none of it gets read, right? So it's sort of pointless, but then I try to think, I'm like, what are the things I need to say, you know, versus what's just in the syllabus?
Right.
And it's like, maybe I'm wondering if I need to, you know, be more explicit about, you don't have to come to office hours or come to my office to see me only when
Oh, yeah.
you are really struggling with something,
Right.
only when you've failed an exam, only when you know, like,
A good idea.
Yeah.
if you just want to come in and, you know, just talk about the core. I mean, I do say, you know, I say something in my syllabus, like, you know, whether it's course content stuff or, you know, advice about this thing or that thing, or just to, you know, do various things. But like, if that is, you know, I don't know exactly what their perception of office hours are, but I think a lot of the time we talk about it, like, you're struggling, come to my office. It's like, well,
I can't go because I don't know what question to ask.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, well, and I have something in my syllabus. I don't think it's actually working, but because nobody's ever done it. But I say, if you want, you can bring a friend with you to office hours. So maybe it's a question of what to say versus what's in the syllabus.
I started a thing last semester in my patho class. It's always, you know, it's a class that students struggle a lot with. And I saw some teacher on Twitter had talked about this thing that she did in her class, and it was called community learning contribution. And she gave you know, some portion of the, you know, points for the semester were on their contributions to community learning, and they had to do a reflection at the end of the semester and talk about the things that they did, and, you know, say, you know, how many points out of this they think they earned. And basically, you know, all the things that you know, they came up, they generated a list of things to do. And last semester when I did it, I gave them several examples and then said, you'll probably come up with other ways, but it was things like, you know, studying together, tutoring other students, posting your notes to someone, asking questions in class, being, helping other people in class, posting questions or answering questions on the discussion boards,
Yeah.
a whole bunch of different things. And well, I can say that I felt good enough about it that I'm doing it again this semester. And it's, it's one semester. The grades, well, there were many more really good grades than ever before, but also, this particular class had one student who I think tutored the entire class, and he was so good. I mean, I think he really pulled a lot of people up.
Yeah.
So I can't just say like, oh, it's all because I did this community learning thing. I mean, in part though, people were like, he had some incentive to be tutoring them.
Yeah.
They had some incentive to say, well, I sat with this person, multiple times a week to do all of it. I think he was starting to get a little worn down by he was doing so much tutoring, but also, helping to, I oftentimes try to do little things to sort of force some community within the class, because that's really, students, even when they come to my office hours, and I think I'm doing a great job explaining something, but I can't explain it as a 20-year-old would explain it, right? So maybe the way I explain it is not as helpful to them as a peer who actually understands it can explain it to them. So I really try to get them to be working with each other on things. And this was a way that there was a lot more, well, I guess I can't say for certain, but I'm pretty sure there was more of that, because there's always students, I spend a lot of time talking to them about studying together and the benefits of it. But there's always students who are just like, I do better alone. I just want to study alone. But there was less of that this time, because they had, and I actually made it optional. Like you could choose grading scheme A or B. So I gave students that if they're just like totally uncomfortable with it. And I said, you're great. Like I'm going to give you the highest grade between the two. So like if you said, hey, I did this community learning thing, and you clearly didn't, I'm not going to go, well, sorry, you got, 0 out of those 25 points and now your grade dropped. I'm not, the point was to help people do better, not worse. So, and I don't, maybe at some point I should just make this mandatory, but I don't know. I said I'm torn about that, but even those students who you could tell were very reluctant to do it, did put in some more effort into that. And
Cool.
I know it's helping them doing these things. So, and I think those are things that when we talk about, specifically these, the first generation college students, and certainly we know that when they make connections with, a staff or faculty member on campus, that's really helpful. But I think also the, building up a support network of peers is going to be helpful for retention, but it's also helping them do better in their classes. Particularly one area that I have to work on a bit is that I notice, I don't know if any of you notice this sort of thing, but I oftentimes will have students with roughly the same level of understanding are the ones who are sitting next to each other, who are studying together. And so it's like, okay, this isn't super helpful when you're both D students and you're like helping each other study. And it's like, okay, you need people that are doing better and people who are doing not as well, because, you sort of, so I need to do more sort of explanation of like, you're only around people who are doing exactly the same that you are. It's hard, it's not benefiting you in the same way. But that's, that's a hard thing to.
But I think you've got the start, because you've got kind of a structure built into the class. So maybe it's like getting in there a little bit and getting your hands dirty with the groups or something.
But I might, now maybe I'm going to add something to that list and, bring a friend with you to office hours. Right. And because then it's, it adds that community aspect. They're more likely to come with somebody else maybe. And
I love it. I'm so excited. I got so many good ideas.
Oh yeah, all the time in class.
Random groups, visibly random groups.
This is no.
You did that so well, Suzanne.
And it is working amazingly.
Yeah, this is another thing I go. So in some of my other classes, I will like, we'll do something that takes much more time in class. And so for those things, I would randomize them and do all this. And then in this class, some of the things I'm like, we're going to do this for 5 minutes and move on. So I don't want all that moving around the classroom, doubling the amount of time it takes or whatever. But I need to probably do more of that when it is a longer
Or just
thing that
at
we're
the
doing.
beginning of class.
That's true.
'Cause
Yeah.
that's how mine
Sit
do.
in
I just
different
have cards that they walk into the door, they pick a card, and their card determines their group and their location in the classroom.
places.
And the locations vary. I just throw out the table labels each day, and so, the labels end up on different tables depending on how I pass them out, but and it's visibly random, so they see that I'm not pre-planning, like, who goes where. And I don't get a lot of pushback from them.
When I came to your class, your
students.
students said they loved it because
Yeah.
they got to work with I came at the end of this.
That's really good. Okay, I'm
They're
gonna-
exposed to all kinds of perspectives.
So you get like note cards or something that have, what do you?
Originally, I was just doing with playing cards. Now I've
playing.
made a set of, I want them to be groups of 3 as much as possible, so I've
Uh-huh.
made like famous trios like Larry, Curly, Bro, and Harry, Hermione, and Ron, and so now I've kind of made my own, but originally I just did it with playing cards, and I figured out how many I needed and how many sets of 3, and I just randomized them into this little display on the table, and like they just walk in.
On the board.
You have- But you're in a class that has tables?
Yeah.
Or you mean like, are they like tables like this, or you mean like rows of tables?
No, well, it's those stupid hexagonal tables set into like 2 tables making a sort of hexagon-ish thing.
All my classrooms, they're always, the
Oh.
rows, and so it's
Yeah.
always like, so grouping them is a little more difficult.
I usually just use quadrants, I'll be like, y'all are in that quadrant.
Yeah.
Because I have
But
those.
I like the mixing. I mean, it's always so funny to me because students will come in on the first day of class, and I usually tell most of my classes that I'm like, all right, now when you come into class next time, be very careful about where you choose to sit, because I know you will never be moved from that spot. But then I'd always, it's like, I want students to be comfortable, right, to some degree, but although making them a little uncomfortable can be good for them.
Yeah.
But maybe this idea of like, what I need to do is just, randomize where they're sitting but the problem is, you run into things where it's like, somebody's like, I have to be in the front row because I can't see the board very well, or I have to, so there's always, I run into these things
Yeah.
where it's like this.
And I don't do a lot of work on a front board, like we're up and they're doing things on the sideboards or at their tables, and so I don't, that's
And
not.
this, well, in Patha, which is the class that,
Yeah.
there's just a lot of back and forth between
Sure.
stuff up on the screen and then the stuff we're doing here. And so then you run into these part where it's like, okay, they're working in this group, and then they've got to find their special place to sit because it's where they like to sit when they're
Sure.
like writing down notes or something. I don't have to think about this over the next 2
I
days.
start my random groups too, day one. Day one,
Yeah.
they walk in, and as they're walking in, I'm like, hey, grab a card, and then, find the table that goes with your card. And so that they're never experiencing
Yeah.
not doing that. And then when I do let them, like, I won't have cards out, like on the day after a test or something, they'll walk in, they're like, where's my cards? You want
Yeah, now I'm uncomfortable.
one? They're always like so just shocked that that's how I do that.
You get into class before all of your students?
Yes.
I've never been in class before a certain student.
Well, Yeah, so we finally have we have 2 dedicated elementary education classrooms,
Okay.
and I teach in one of them. So last semester it didn't work because there was someone in there before me.
Yeah.
But this semester, I'm the first class, even though I have 9 o'clock, I'm the first one, and so I will be able to be in there again. What I finally started doing was I would get into the room before Tom. So as soon as I got to campus, before I even went to my office, I would come over, lay my cards out on the counter, and put the little table labels on the counter, and my students would, when they got their cards, they would lay out their table label, like they would pick their table. So that's how I got around that. Because I was like, this is dumb. I'm coming in and half of them are already here, and then I'm making them move. But so that's what I started doing.
I've got to think about the
Because
logistics.
there's a
of it.
countertop, like as soon as they walk in the door, there's a countertop there. So I could just put the cards out, and his class would ignore them and mine would take them.
This is such good stuff. I am so excited about all of these ideas that we've come up with. I'm going to turn it over to Tracy to kind of wrap us up and talk about the First Scholars Network and ways that we can think about going forward.
So part of the, I mean, we've had first generation student things in the CTL before. This isn't new. But one thing that is new to us is NASPA, if you're not familiar, is a national organization for student affairs professionals. And so they have a First Scholars Network, and there's a way for you to kind of work through this process where you can become a first generation campus, kind of have a notarized that you're known as a first gen campus. And so that's kind of what we applied for the program. And so the First Scholars is kind of the first step in it. So we have to do some goal setting around first generation ideas. And for some institutions, it could be that they're just starting to collect data. Like they haven't even started collecting data of who's first gen, all the way to somebody who's been doing it for a long time, and they have centers for first generation learning and those kind of things. So our goals, we have two of them. One of them is to increase students' sense of belonging on campus, so first gen student belonging. Part of how we're going to achieve or work towards that goal this year is we're going to do a student panel on National First Generation College Student Day, which is November 8th. So we'll be hosting that. And then another thing that we're doing is we're wanting to identify faculty, staff who on campus who are first generation students or were first generation students. And we want to do basically kind of window placards for the office. So students can see, wait, there's a lot of people on this campus who are first gen, just like I am, who I could reach out to, might have similar questions, maybe help with some of those, having some of those conversations, right? And so that's something that we're working on. Those are a couple of the goals for that. We also are increasing faculty and staff professional development. So actually doing this session today helped us meet one of our goals. But
And we wanted to increase the number of faculty who are participating, so we went from 0 to 4.
we're just kicking the year off right.
Double, right? Double.
It does. And so we're very excited, but there will be additional things coming kind of as we have new ideas. We just kind of wanted to to be honest, collect some low-hanging fruit, stuff that we are, that we know is going on, but that we can do. And also we have monthly calls with other people who are in the network. So we're getting lots of good ideas from them, and just to develop that. So I think the next slide is so basically, if you would like to take another thing, or if you would be interested in coming to these in the future, or to be honest, right now, our working group is Marlowe, myself, and Andy Hansen. So that we want to obviously develop this more. So if that's something that, and I'm not even sure what that would look like, to be honest, at this point. But if it's something that you would want to continue having conversations about, you'd be interested in that, then let us know. We'd love to have you, whether you're first gen or not. I mean, even having that allyship is good too. So, or getting the word out that we did this today, and that we're starting some different conversations and those kind of things. We just love to have your help to the level that you would like to and are able to help, I guess.
Well, we're all from different divisions, so I think we might have people in our divisions that can think of that would be interested in doing more with this. And I think in the spring we're hoping to have a session in here that maybe includes some student panelists, so that faculty can come in and hear from some of our first generation students, and maybe also some faculty, right? Like kind of a mixed conversation. So we're looking toward that in April, but we also, we just want to kind of start gathering ideas. So if you have things, if things come up for you, if you want to work on, sharing some resources for a Canvas module kind of geared toward, this toolkit, that would be great. And there's probably a lot of stuff we haven't thought of yet. So.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would like to.
Yay.
I always like conversations like this because I get lots of good ideas.
I know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But
So.
also, I think so. I mean, well, and from a slightly from a self-interested perspective, like the science grant that I have right now, one of the components of that is exposing more students from backgrounds that are underrepresented in the sciences.
Uh-huh.
And so, in my grant application, it talks about, how many of our students are first generation college, because that's a group that is underrepresented, especially.
That's great.
And so, Pell eligibility is a requirement to apply for this grant. Your institution has to have at least 25% Pell eligible students. We're way above that. All these first gen students and stuff. So, and like I said, the majority, I mean, I have to look back at what the numbers are now. So I've been asking all of my students about whether their parents had 4-year degrees or not, using that as the definition. And, it's at least 80% of the students in my lab have been first generation college.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so to be able to say in my annual reports, when I try to get the next grant or whatever, like, yeah, we serve these students and these are the professional development things that I'm doing to try and better, involve these students and serve these students. So.
And I think on a side note, you and I need to talk because I have my camp students as well. That the science ones would definitely benefit from learning more about the Embrace stuff.
Yeah.
Too, so
Yeah.
we'll talk again.
Research opportunities, and so one of the things we didn't list up here, but when we're thinking about first generation students, you're thinking about first generation students who are engaged in undergraduate research, right? So again, just kind of the diversity of the experiences of the students on our campus. And I think we're kind of out of time for our scheduled time, but I thank you for being here. I've loved this conversation.
Taking the time, I know kind of gearing up and in the midst of everything else, take an hour out of your day is a lot, so thank you.
And I'll invite you, if you'd like to give feedback, you can, you don't have to. So either there are paper forms on the table or there's one. Yeah. So, and, but yeah. Yeah, let me just end the recording.